am in negative calories, so I am in no risk of putting fat back onto my body. So, hey presto, it is probably like the simplest way to look at a cardio session. So therefore, to me, you should not be running on. You don't need to eliminate your carbohydrates. The main thing is there to have your calorie count lower than what you're burning. So if you're you're using your fat at rest, you're using it during your cardio session. You got your carbs in there, so you have a great weight session. You burn the calories. The carbs that you eat then go back in to replenish the carbs that were used up during that smashing weight session that you had. And to me, the heavier weights, and maintaining muscle mass are so imperative when you're competing. If you switch over and start doing 50 rep sets and lower weights, then you are going to watch your muscle devolumize, because a lot of the time it is there in response to the heavier weights that you are doing. So that's where that interplay between you're doing cardio to burn fat and you're doing your weights to maintain muscle. So that's where that's the energy system that the body is basically using when you're at low intensity. Now, as the intensity creeps up in cardio and you're getting closer to that, say 80% of your VO2 max, the amount of fat that you're burning, or the percentage of your energy that's coming from fat, is dropping down to about 40 to 45%. Instead of being up at about 80%. So therefore you are burning just a lot more carbohydrate, or glucose I should say, just to fuel that energy that you're needing to do that particular work. So whilst you're not directly burning the fat, you're burning the carbohydrates. Again, at some point you have to go and backfill that carbohydrate that was lost. And that's where, again, the more carbohydrate you burn through that type of system, the more the carbohydrate that you eat will go into replenishing that, because that's what the body wants to do. The body naturally wants to put everything back to a status quo. The body wants to store. So when you put those carbs in, you go and you store those carbohydrates, and then there isn't the carbohydrate needed to do other functions. So then the body says, hey, I'm low in carbs, and then it signals for the body to release body fat and burn that as an energy source. So the body is really smart about reading all those signals. So insulin, or the lack of, or the low insulin, which occurs obviously when there's no there's no no glucose floating around in the blood, because essentially insulin is there to take the glucose out of your blood and store it. So if the glucagon, which is what it's the insulin which signals the glucagon, which then tells the body to release carbs into the, glucose into the blood, or to go and break down more body fat and burn more fatty acids for a source of energy. So that all links in together. So you do not need to eliminate those carbohydrates for your body to put them into a different place where it wants to utilize it. But it's like having that reserve, where if you imagine you go to do a long, like an endurance event, or you go to do your cardio, or you even go to do your weights, and you've decided to deplete yourself totally of carbohydrate. And now we've all done this because there's a system behind this when it comes to carbing up or hyperloading. But we all have done a training session when we have been really devoid of carbohydrates, and we really feel that drop in energy because we don't have that explosive power, because that energy system is not fueled. So it's like if you don't have that reserve there, it's almost like you're cheating yourself, because you could have all of the body fat reserve and also have this carbohydrate reserve. So to me, it doesn't make any sense to not want to have that stored in your body, because it's like going on holiday and realizing that you had a special savings account that you'd put away for holidays, and you have all your money, and then you realize that you've got this money that you put aside specifically for the holiday. Well, that's kind of like what your glycogen stores are. You're doing some event, you're burning the glucose that's in your blood, you're burning your body fat, you up the intensity, and then even without that, it's there as like your body will use it because it's supposed to use it. So if you don't have it, it's almost like you've cheated yourself. And it's interesting that people talk about carbohydrates as being an ergogenic aid, meaning it actually can enhance performance. And again, there's so much research around the role that carbohydrate plays in providing energy during sport, and particularly like the longer endurance sport. As I said, they utilize so much more, and athletes who are doing really long-term training, 6 hours a day, long events, or even split training, anything where there's a lot more endurance, they can be utilizing 500-600 grams of carbohydrate a day. Which is an absolutely massive amount, and they've got to put that back. You can't put that all back in one meal. So that's where, splitting your meals up, and this is where I'll kind of segue into talking about the nutritional side of it. That idea of, whilst the body's constantly got a way of dealing with what's happening. Like the body's constantly reading your situation and adjusting to what it needs to do. The best way to make your body the most efficient is by delivering it what it needs when it needs it, so that it doesn't have to kind of walk off, doesn't have to switch over to different systems which maybe aren't as efficient, because, burning fat does take more oxygen. You do have other different byproducts building up in your system which can make your system more acidic. You maybe have to excrete those, so you may be urinating a lot more, or you can get dehydration because you need more water to eliminate those particular products. So all of these things are kind of going on, and we don't tend to think about it, and that's why the body was set up in the most efficient way originally, to utilize what the energy source that it was supposed to utilize, and the other system is kind of set up really to as a failover, or when you're not in a state of exercise, it's just kind of sitting there at rest doing all of that. Now I wanted to say, as I mentioned before about exercise and adaptation, then obviously the more that you train, the more your body gets efficient at doing or at using particular energy systems. There's a lot of studies being done about elite versus recreational, and they have shown that the body does adapt, and will again, because fat is such a massive store source in most people's bodies, it will design and teach the body how to utilize more of that fat that's stored and utilize it more efficiently. And what that's doing is basically it wants to save those carbohydrate stores for when it's really, really needed in those high intensity type of situations. So training will help, and as I said, training will help to a larger degree in aerobic type of exercise than what it will in your anaerobic type systems, in terms of making those more efficient. So you do have that particular side of it. So the idea of that is that you can go for longer, because the more that you can draw on that massive reserve of energy, the less that you have to rely on what's stored in your body via the carbohydrate, because that is limited. Like, you can't keep on putting more and more in. And I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but that is where I was talking about dropping why we've all dropped to a low carbohydrate diet, is because you can actually overcompensate. But again, it's a limited way in which you can make that happen, and it's still finite. Like, so even if you can increase your stores by 50%, it's a bonus, but it still is going to come to a limit at some point in time. So whereas your fat stores, I think the amount of energy that you can get from those to run what you need to do is generally going to be more than enough, unless you're doing something like incredibly extreme, like Hawaii, Ironman or something like that. But for what most of us are doing, if you're working in that that sort of moderate intensity type aerobic activity, there is plenty of body fat to do what we need to do. But if you do need to have that sprint at the end, if you've burned all your glycogen, the other person's going to run right past you. So again, coming back to the diet and coming back to the fat side of it, and talking about the MCTs, and again, I'm really sorry because I am jumping all over the place here, but the MCTs are a little bit different to the majority of fats that we eat, because they do burn a lot quicker, and they burn and are processed in the body more like a carbohydrate. So there is a fair bit of research around the use of those during races, for recovery after races, and an energy source leading up to races, particularly for endurance, to see if people can, go for longer, because they obviously have taught their body how to use that as an energy source, and through training utilize fat more as an energy source, so they have more of that. The limiting thing though with the MCTs is that they do apparently cause digestional upset. They can cause, diarrhea and stuff, which when you're training and trying to compete is just really not a great thing. So fats do have their limitations in the way that our body does digest them, and what can actually happen on on the back end of those products, and those are counterproductive to when you're trying to be performing at a high level. You really don't want to have any kind of thing which is going to impede you from being able to perform the way that you want to perform. So all of those kind of things really do come down to trial and error. Make a plan and try them out, but be prepared that you may go too far and something may go wrong, and you may end up having worse performance than not. But I definitely would look into using MCTs if you are doing any type of endurance work and want to see if you can get more out of your performance, whether you can go harder or go longer on one of those events. So I definitely would be looking into that. Coming back to again the nutritional side of it, one thing that I have kind of seen come out